Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I pay $590 a month for HOA fees in California. $590. That's more than some people's car payments. And for what? Landscaping that looks like it hasn't been touched since the Bush administration? A pool that's always closed for maintenance? A gate that doesn't even keep solicitors out? I can't tell you how many times I've seen delivery trucks or random teenagers just waltzing through it like it's a theme park. But the worst part, I met a former HOA board member at a community event who casually told me, "You might want to start suspecting the current board of pocketing money." That one sentence was enough to flip a switch in me. I'd always had my suspicions, but hearing it from someone who'd been on the inside, it sent my frustration through the roof. I decided to take a closer look at the expenses they send out in those annual budget reports. I usually toss them straight into the recycling bin, but not this time. $208,221 for landscaping? Are they importing rare flowers from the Amazon rainforest? Because the patchy grass and half-dead bushes around here don't exactly scream six-figure upkeep. And $33,000 for the pool? The pool that's closed half the year and looks like it hasn't been cleaned since the last ice age? Yeah, sure. $31,000 for the gate, which is basically just a glorified fence. Please. And $108,000 for insurance? Insurance for what? The crumbling stucco that no one's bothered to fix? The general maintenance line item is another joke at $41,000. General maintenance of what? The trash chute that's always clogged? And $76,000 for rubbish collection? Unless the garbage collectors are showing up in tuxedos and serving caviar with a side of trash removal, there's no way that's a reasonable number. The more I dug into it, the more it started to feel like a full-blown scam. I mean, they're siphoning off money from us right under our noses, and nobody seems to care. It's like we're all frogs in a pot of slowly boiling water. So, I decided to attend a board meeting. I figured if I was going to get any real answers, I'd have to confront them directly. I'd never been to one before, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a few board members sitting around a table, going through the motions. What I walked into was a circus. The room was packed. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd started to notice the inconsistencies in the budget. People were standing against the walls, muttering to each other, clutching their printed copies of the budget like they were holding evidence for a trial. The board members sat at the front, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The meeting started off with the usual pleasantries. Roll call, approval of last month's minutes. Blah, blah, blah. Then it was time for the financial report. The treasurer, a man named Richard who looked like he hadn't smiled in 20 years, stood up to give his spiel. As you can see, he droned. Landscaping costs are up this year due to the drought. We've had to bring in additional resources to maintain the common areas. That was my cue. I shot up my hand like a student in the front row of a classroom. Yes, Richard asked, clearly annoyed. Can you elaborate on what additional resources means? Because $208,000 is a lot of money for landscaping, and I'm not seeing where it's going. The room went silent. You could feel the tension crackling in the air. Well, Richard stammered, we've had to hire a new landscaping company, and their rates are higher due to the quality of their work. Quality? I shot back. The grass is dead. The bushes are overgrown. I saw a tumbleweed roll through last week. If that's quality, I'd hate to see what a bad job looks like. A few people chuckled, but Richard didn't find it funny. We're doing the best we can with the resources we have, he said stiffly. Then maybe you can explain the $33,000 for the pool, I said, not letting up. Is it lined with gold? Because it's always closed. And $76,000 for trash collection? Are the garbage trucks made of solid platinum? By now, the room was buzzing. People started shouting out their own questions. What about the gate? It's broken half the time. Why is the insurance so high? Where's the breakdown for general maintenance? The board members started to look panicked. Richard was sweating bullets, and the president, a woman named Marcia, tried to regain control. Please, everyone, one at a time, she said, holding up her hands like a traffic cop. We're happy to address your concerns, but let's keep this civil. Civil? Someone shouted from the back. How about you start being honest with us? It was chaos. People were shouting over each other, demanding answers. Marcia finally banged her gavel like she was presiding over a courtroom. If this continues, we'll have to adjourn the meeting, she threatened. That's convenient, I said loudly. Shut down the meeting so you don't have to answer any questions. How about you show us the receipts for these expenses? Or is that too much transparency for you? Marcia glared at me like I just insulted her entire family. The financial records are available for review upon request, she said through gritted teeth. Great, I said. I'll be requesting them first thing tomorrow. The meeting eventually devolved into shouting matches and finger pointing, and the board ended up walking out. But I wasn't done. I filed my request for the financial records the next morning, and surprise, they dragged their feet. Weeks went by with no response. I followed up multiple times, and each time, I got some excuse about how they were still compiling the documents. Finally, after nearly 2 months, they handed over a stack of papers so thick it could have been used as a doorstop. I spent hours combing through them, and what I found was interesting. Payments to companies with no online presence. Checks written to board members for reimbursements, with no explanations. And a landscaping company that just so happened to be owned by Marcia's cousin. I brought my findings to the next board meeting, ready to blow the whole thing wide open. But as soon as I started speaking, Marcia cut me off. We've addressed these concerns already, she snapped. No, you haven't, I said, refusing to back down. And I'm not going to stop until we get some real answers. She gave me a look that could kill and then called for a vote to end the meeting. Of course, the other board members voted in her favor. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be an easy fight. They were all in on it, protecting each other. But I wasn't about to give up. If they thought they could bully me into silence, they were in for a rude awakening. I've started talking to my neighbors, sharing what I found. A few of them are just as angry as I am, and we're thinking about hiring an attorney to look into this. It's going to cost money, but at this point, I'd rather spend it on a lawyer than let these crooks keep stealing from us. This isn't over, not by a long shot. If they want to fight, they've got one. Things started moving fast once the idea of hiring an attorney turned into reality. A group of us, about 15 neighbors, pooled our resources and hired a lawyer. He wasn't some high-profile hotshot, but he specialized in HOA fraud cases, and that was good enough for us. We handed over the documents I'd gathered and laid everything out, the shady payments, the lack of transparency, and the connections between board members and the vendors. Yeah, this stinks, the lawyer said after his initial review. If even half of this is true, there's enough here to cause serious legal trouble. That was music to my ears. Finally, someone who wasn't afraid to call it like it was. He filed a formal complaint with the state's Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in California. He also sent a demand letter to the board, outlining the questionable expenses and demanding an independent audit of the HOA's finances. Marcia and her cronies didn't take it well. At the next board meeting, Marcia stood up and went on a tirade about how the complaints were baseless, how the board members were volunteers doing their best, and how these personal attacks were demoralizing for the entire community. You're not victims, I shot back. You're thieves, and now the state is involved, so get ready to explain your volunteer work to someone who isn't buying your nonsense. That got a reaction. Marcia turned red, her voice trembling with rage. We'll see you in court, she yelled, slamming her gavel down so hard it echoed through the room. And court is exactly where we ended up. The audit we demanded uncovered even more dirt than we'd imagined. Tens of thousands of dollars unaccounted for, payments to non-existent companies, and reimbursements to board members with no receipts to back them up. It wasn't just bad bookkeeping. It was outright embezzlement. The state got involved, and subpoenas started flying. The HOA board was ordered to turn over their personal financial records, and that's when the real fireworks started. Marcia lawyered up immediately, as did Richard and 2 other board members. The rest of the board quit on the spot, claiming they had no idea what was going on. Yeah, sure. The HOA's insurance refused to cover their legal fees, citing gross negligence. That meant Marcia and her buddies had to pay out of pocket. It didn't take long for them to start pointing fingers at each other. In court filings, Marcia claimed Richard had been the one handling most of the finances. Richard countered by accusing Marcia of coercing him into signing off on payments. It was a mess, and while they were busy tearing each other apart, the rest of us were dealing with the fallout. The HOA's funds were almost completely drained. There wasn't enough money to cover basic services like trash collection or landscaping. The pool was shut down indefinitely, the gate stopped working altogether, and the once rare tumbleweeds started multiplying like rabbits. But the worst part was the legal fees. Even though we'd exposed the fraud, the HOA still had to defend itself in court. And where do you think that money came from? our pockets. The board imposed a special assessment of $1,000 per unit to cover the costs. People were furious, but what could we do? If we didn't pay, the HOA had the power to put liens on our properties. The lawsuits dragged on for months, and then, just when we thought it couldn't get worse, the criminal charges hit. The state filed embezzlement charges against Marcia, Richard, and 2 other board members. Marcia pleaded not guilty and went on a local news station to claim she was being framed by disgruntled homeowners. "I've dedicated years of my life to this community," she said, crocodile tears streaming down her face. "This is a witch hunt, plain and simple. Yeah, a witch hunt with bank statements and canceled checks as evidence." The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with residents, reporters, and even people from neighboring HOAs who'd come to watch the drama unfold. The prosecutor laid out the case in painstaking detail, showing how Marcia and her co-defendants had funneled money into fake companies, paid themselves consulting fees, and even used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses like vacations and home renovations. Marcia's defense? It was all a misunderstanding. She claimed she didn't realize the payments were improper, that she trusted Richard to handle the finances, and that any mistakes were purely accidental. The jury didn't buy it. After weeks of testimony, they found her guilty on multiple counts of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Richard and the others struck plea deals, but Marcia wasn't so lucky. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. But restitution didn't mean much when the HOA was already bankrupt. The fraud had left us in such bad shape that we couldn't even afford to repair the gate, let alone fix the community's reputation. Property values plummeted, and people started moving out in droves. For sale signs popped up on every street, but buyers were hard to come by. Who wants to move into a neighborhood with a notorious HOA scandal? As for me, I stuck it out for a while, hoping things would improve. But the new board that was elected to replace Marcia's crew wasn't much better. They were overwhelmed, inexperienced, and constantly fighting with each other. The special assessments kept coming, and every time I opened my mailbox, there was another notice about some new fee or emergency meeting. Eventually, I threw in the towel. I sold my condo at a massive loss and moved into a rental. No HOA, no board meetings, no surprise assessments. Just peace and quiet. Looking back, I'm not sure if exposing the fraud was worth it. We got justice, sure, but at what cost? The neighborhood was left in ruins, relationships were destroyed, and the people who stayed are still dealing with the fallout. And Marcia, she got out of prison early for good behavior. Rumor has it she's already trying to get on the board of another HOA. California, where even the absurd is somehow normal. It's like New York City prices, but with palm trees and way more Cali vibes. Speaking of crazy expenses, my best friend got a visit from city code enforcement because his front yard grass was too green during water restrictions. They were ready to hit him with a $1,000 fine and a mandatory court appearance if it turned out he'd been watering it. Turns out, it wasn't water at all. The grass was high-end astroturf, complete with fake blades that looked real enough to fool the city. You can't make this stuff up. I live in a smaller, well-maintained condo community in the Midwest, 92 units, low cost of living, and no real risks like wildfires or hurricanes. Even with that, our insurance just shot up to $91,000. We only managed to get it that low by doubling the deductible. And let me tell you, finding a company that would even quote us was a nightmare. The entire condo insurance market is in shambles. I get the frustration with your HOA board, but honestly, this one might not be on them. It's happening everywhere. Not sure about California, but most states have laws that give homeowners the right to review HOA financial records. Where I live, members can request an in-person inspection within 10 days, though they can charge for printing or providing copies. You should be able to review statements, contracts, bank records, even check registers. By law, they can't withhold those unless they include sensitive personal info about owners or something lawyer-related. While it won't necessarily expose kickbacks or other shady dealings, it might give you a clearer idea of where the money is going, or isn't. Honestly, though, those amounts you listed don't seem out of the ordinary at first glance.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. to encourage us to make more videos. Please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.